And hello, everyone. Thank you so much for streaming with us here on ABC News Live. I'm Kira Phillips.
And I'm Terry Moran. 330,000 in 70 years. That is the daunting potential number of children who may have been sexually abused by the Catholic Church in France. Some 3,000 priests and an unknown number of others have been accused by authors of a new report, a number that pales in comparison to other countries facing church sex abuse allegations. The president of the Conference of Bishops of France, Eric de Moulin-Beaufort, says French bishops, quote, are appalled at the conclusions of the report and have asked for forgiveness.
The world's most prestigious physics award is handed to two researchers at the forefront of the climate change battle, pioneers working on why the climate is changing, giving us a chance to predict global warming. The scientists from Japan and Germany awarded the coveted Nobel Prize in Physics. And it's coming less than a month before the start of climate negotiations in Glasgow, Scotland, where world leaders will attempt to solidify their commitments to curb global warming.
And someone, not us, not either one of us, unfortunately, is waking up.
We wouldn't be here.
That's true. Is waking up to a staggering amount of money today. Lots. A person in California has won the record-breaking Powerball jackpot of $699.8 million, the seventh largest jackpot in U.S. lottery history. Odds of winning 100 and 292 million. So that's probably not good odds. Be careful on playing the lottery. We don't know who the winner is yet, but we do know the winning ticket was bought in Morro Bay near San Luis Obispo. Good for them. Bad for the rest of us.
Well, we have some rare good news in the pandemic. Cases have been falling, and as of today, 76% of the eligible population has had at least one dose of the vaccine. Also today, Johnson & Johnson officially submitted data to the FDA on booster shots. Those could be authorized sometime this month. Joining us now, the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, Dr. Anthony Fauci. Dr. Fauci, good to have you here. Thanks so much.
Good to be with you. Thank you for having me.
Well, let's start with boosters, shall we? How important is it to get boosters approved for J&J and Moderna, for that matter?
Well, the booster shots, as we know, were approved for Pfizer and in a certain level of people at a certain category, namely those elderly and those with underlying conditions and in other circumstances. Since there are three products that are being utilized, one under a full approval and two under emergency use authorization, it's important that if you're going to implement a booster program to get the optimal and durable response, you would want all three of the products to be authorized to be given a boost. And that's the reason why we're looking with some anticipation to what the FDA's decision will be about the booster program that will be submitted and it will be examined by the FDA from both J&J and Moderna.
And so, Dr. Fauci, there's research showing that two shots are more effective for the J&J vaccine, I understand. But what about people who may want to switch if they got Pfizer or Moderna? Can you mix and match?
Well, we're doing those experiments right now, Terry, that are going to answer that question. It's sort of a 9-part grid where you take the three products that are given as the initial vaccination and you mix as the booster either J&J or Moderna or Pfizer. And pretty soon we're going to have the data that will be examined by the FDA to determine whether or not it is safe and whether or not it induces an appropriate response if you mix one particular boost with one other particular product. So we'll have the answer to that question as soon as the FDA, gives their approval. And I can't guarantee they will, but I can certainly guarantee they'll look at those data very carefully the way they always do.
Mm.
And Dr. Fauci, bigger picture here, cases in this country appear to have peaked. Where are we in the pandemic right now? And do you think this is the last major COVID wave that we will see in the U.S. unless a major new variant pops up?
Well, certainly we are seeing a turnaround both in hospitalization and cases. The deaths are still up, but that usually is a lagging indicator and very likely will start coming down together with the diminution in the cases and in the hospitalization. That's a very good sign. But I believe you have to realize that we still have in this country who are eligible to be vaccinated who have not yet been vaccinated. So what happens as we get into the winter months, it is going to depend a lot on ourselves, upon what we do. If we can get, I would say, an overwhelming majority of those individuals who have not yet gotten vaccinated, we can make it much more likely that that slope will continue to go down and stay down, which means we could see a diminution to the point of getting out of this pandemic phase that we're in. I hope that that's what happens. It looks like it's heading in that direction. But in order to avoid any subsequent resurges, it would be very important to get a lot more people vaccinated.
For sure.
Also, to access to testing, you know, this week the FDA approved another over-the-counter rapid test and says it will scale up manufacturing for these tests significantly now. How important is that to stopping the spread, and why aren't they widely available already? Because depending on where you go, sometimes it's hard to get a test. It's expensive. You can't pay up front. Sometimes insurance isn't getting back to you right away. You know, it's not a real smooth operation yet.
Well, that is going to change and is changing very rapidly, Kira. You're quite correct that it is very important to have widespread available tests that are essentially point of care where you can get the answer in a few minutes. There are going to be literally hundreds of millions of those tests be made available relatively soon. The Biden administration has made an investment of a couple of $2 billion to do that. So we are going to see a lot more availability and easy availability of rapid testing quite soon.
We have been looking for that for a while. And Dr. Fauci, here we are in October. Yeah, I've got 3 kids who are still trick-or-treating age. So how do you evaluate the risks associated with this holiday for them and you know, maybe for the adults who will be handing out candy at the door?
Well, again, every time you make a statement about that, someone says you're the Grinch that takes away the pleasure of the world. I mean, there's no doubt that just wait till tonight on Fox News. But the fact is that you've really got to be careful, and that when you're outdoors, it's always safer than indoors. So rather than congregate in groups, that when you're in a situation where there is congregate, you wear a mask, whether you're outdoor or indoor. You can have a lot of fun on Halloween and still be safe. So we don't want to take the joy away from Halloween from the children, but you want to make sure that you appreciate that you are still in a situation where the dynamics of infection are really quite high. We still, as I mentioned, if you look throughout the country, even though the number of cases are coming down, they are not low enough for us to feel really quite comfortable. So have a good time. Wear a mask if you're unsure. Stay with people who you know and who you know what their status is. Go with your family and enjoy the Halloween.
We won't be that upset if they don't have a lot of candy. That's for sure. Well, there still isn't, Dr. Fauci, full guidance about the holidays yet, as we know, but it's hard not to think ahead already. We're even thinking about Halloween. Vaccines may be authorized for kids 5 to 11 by Thanksgiving, but it's still too soon to say. So will it be safe to mix unvaccinated kids with vaccinated adults, you know, as we even move forward thinking about Thanksgiving and Christmas and Hanukkah and all of that? What should families be thinking about?
Well, families should plan on enjoying things in the family setting, without a doubt, particularly among vaccinated individuals. If you're vaccinated and members of your family and you are within your household with people you know, you want to try as best as you can, if people are not vaccinated, not to mix with people who you don't know what their status is. But for the family core, being together, enjoying Thanksgiving, enjoying Christmas, of course you can do that. One thing you can say, the more people that get vaccinated, the more people that can safely do that.
And just staying on the note of our kids, you know, the FDA is meeting on vaccines for kids 5 to 11 at the end of the month. Assuming those are approved, how much longer do you think it'll take for the next age group, kids 2 to 5?
Well, those data are already being collected right now. The FDA's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices are going to be, the FDA's VRBPAC, which is their board, their advisory committee to the FDA. I misspoke. It's not the ACIP. The advisory committee to the FDA will get the data. We'll meet with them. You don't want to rush things. You don't want to put pressure. They do a really good job of determining the safety, the appropriateness, the efficacy of a particular product. I can tell you that the data that are being accumulated on that very younger group will be made available to the FDA, and they will make their decision based on the data.
We're looking forward to that. Let's talk about the mandates that are out there, the mandates which are such a powerful tool, but they have triggered controversy, anxiety, even anger for some people. They seem to be working, though. Today, a federal judge rejecting a request to halt New York City's public school mandate. Mayor Bill de Blasio says about 96% of teachers in New York have been vaccinated so far. United Airlines says only 232 workers out of 67,000 were terminated for refusing the shot, with a lot of people changing their minds at the last minute. So it does feel like mandates are a push that can work. What do you think about expanding them across the country, or at least in order to do certain things like getting on an airplane in the first place? Do you think airlines should mandate vaccines for passengers?
Terry, what I believe you're going to see is, I don't think you're going to see a total central mandate from the federal government to everyone, but you're going to see, I'll almost guarantee it, that the local enterprises, local organizations, local universities and colleges are going to continue to expand this whole process of mandating. You showed the data right there. No one likes to be told what they have to do, but these are unusual times. In fact, these are unprecedented times, at least within the last 100+ years. We have 700,000 Americans have died. So there comes a time when there are things for the common community and the common social good that you've got to pull back and just not insist on what you consider is your own individual choice for things. There comes a time when unusual times lead to unusual ways of implementing things are well established to be of importance from a public health standpoint. So what you're seeing is important. Many people were saying, well, if you mandate, people are going to quit. They're not. People they're not that set against being vaccinated that they're willing to give up their jobs. And as people get vaccinated to the point of the numbers you've shown, the 96% or more complying with the mandate to get vaccinated, that's going to be a very, very important step in the direction of ending this pandemic. And I think when people look back on this, they're going to say, mandates worked. They saved a lot of lives, and they've got us out of this more quickly than we otherwise would have gotten out from it.
All right, we're heading to Brooklyn just for you. As you know, Brooklyn Nets star Kyrie Irving missed practice today, the team's first practice at home, and Irving is unavailable to practice or play games in New York as long as he remains unvaccinated. That's the rules now. So, Dr. Fauci, you're a Brooklyn native. You're also a sports fan, I know. What would you tell Kyrie about the vaccine if you had a chance to sit with him courtside?
Well, if I had that opportunity, I'd like to, in a non-confrontative way, have him explain to me what the reasons are why he doesn't want to get vaccinated. And to the best of my ability, I'd like to explain to him why they may not be valid reasons. I mean, is there a fact? Does he think there's not enough information about the vaccine? Does he think they're not safe? Does he think they're not effective? Does he believe any of these conspiracy theories about him? I don't know. I've never had a conversation, but I would try to respect, his opinion, but try to convince him otherwise.
And finally, Dr. Fauci, wanted to get your thoughts on your colleague, Dr. Francis Collins, director of the National Institutes of Health, announcing his retirement today, leading that agency for 12 years, really an icon in American science, American public health as well. What are your thoughts on Dr. Collins? What do you want the American people who may not be familiar with him, as we are here in Washington, what do you want people to know about him?
Well, he's a most extraordinary person in the very positive way. I mean, his tenure at the NIH has been unprecedented. He has served under 3 administrations. He's a world-class scientist. The NIH resources from the Congress have expanded greatly during his tenure. I've known him for many, many years. When he first came to the NIH as the director of one of the institutes, he's been a very close colleague and a friend. His ability to articulate the need for science, the programs he's implemented, his sensitivity to inclusiveness, to equity, to getting more women in high positions, to making sure minorities have an equal access to getting grants. All of those things are just part of his most extraordinary legacy. I'm very sorry to see him go. He's put in a lot of years, and I wish him a lot of success and happiness in his next adventure, which I'm absolutely certain will be productive and successful.
Dr. Anthony Fauci, thanks so much for spending such a good amount of time with us today. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you for having me. Good to be with you.
You bet. Coming up, putting profits over people and knowingly harming our children. Explosive testimony from that Facebook whistleblower as she went before that Senate panel. Straight ahead are damning allegations and what she says Congress needs to do now.
Welcome back. Senators questioned whistleblower and former Facebook product manager Frances Haugen for hours today on Capitol. Haugen says that Facebook misled the public about the harmful impact of its product. And she says that the tech giant's own research shows how the social media platform poses potential risk to children, but that the company chose to ignore their own research in order to maximize profits. Haugen says her breaking point came after the 2020 election, when she says the company dissolved her team that was focused on civil integrity and allowed posts promoting violence at the January 6th insurrection to spread.
I joined Facebook because I think Facebook has the potential to bring out the best in us. But I'm here today because I believe Facebook's products harm children, stoke division, and weaken our democracy. The company's leadership knows how to make Facebook and Instagram safer, but won't make the necessary changes because they have put their astronomical profits before people. Congressional action is needed. They won't solve this crisis without your help.
Mark Zuckerberg, you need to come before this committee. You need to explain to Frances Haugen, to us, to the world, and to the parents of America what you were doing and why you did it. Instagram's business model is pretty straightforward. More eyeballs, more dollars. Everything Facebook does is to add more users and keep them on their apps for longer.
I have a text that was just put up by Facebook's spokesperson, Andy Stone. It says, just pointing out the fact that Frances Haugen did not work on child safety or Instagram or research these issues and has no direct knowledge of the topic from her work at Facebook. So I will simply say this to Mr. Stone. If Facebook wants to discuss their targeting of children, if they want to discuss their practices of privacy invasion or violations of the Children Online Privacy Act, I am extending to you an invitation to step forward, be sworn in, and testify before this committee. We would be pleased to hear from you and welcome your testimony.
Just some of the back and forth there. So many questions remain on what this hearing will mean for Facebook moving forward as lawmakers around the world now consider rewriting the new rules of the internet, in part based on the documents as well as the testimony of Frances Haugen. In the spotlight, the ever-present question, how the governments of the world should deal with things like privacy, safety, content, data sharing, free speech. It's a thorny problem. With this hearing, we may have a clearer view of how much the U.S. government is seeking to prioritize this issue. So joining us now to broaden the conversation is the psychotherapist Teresa Taylor Williams, technology correspondent for the New York Times, Mike Isaac, and ABC News contributor Mike Muse. Welcome to all. And Mike Isaac, I want to start with you. Give us your key takeaways of what we heard today from Frances Haugen.
Yeah, I mean, I think we just saw a very different hearing than we did, just a few years ago during the Cambridge Analytica revelations. Senators were very sort of well-informed. Their staff prepared them very well, and they asked very pointed questions on the type of research that was uncovered. And frankly, Ms. Haugen performed very well. She was like very well spoken on the issues. She said specifically engagement-based algorithms, that is, the types of algorithms that make people come back to the site, that show people things based on how they interact with the content. That's the type of network that Facebook is, and it needs a change. And she made a really compelling case for how kids respond to Instagram, and specifically on body image issues around Instagram. So I think it was not a great hearing for Facebook, and they're going to spend the rest of the next week or more trying to sort of do damage control around it.
Yeah, I think it's going to be even longer than that. Mike Muse, morally bankrupt. That's how Facebook was described today. Yet the company has made it very clear that anyone suggesting it promotes bad content and does nothing is not being factual. How should Facebook hold itself accountable now moving forward in light of everything that we heard today?
I love how you picked up on moral bankrupt, and I love how Frances did that. That was one of the big takeaways I had from her. And so what she was basically was extending an olive branch to Facebook that says, look, I know the problems you're facing are overwhelming for you, and that you feel afraid to come forward and come clean to admit that you have done wrong. But she was saying, just as our bankruptcy regulations and practices allow people to reset, she's saying, Facebook, you can too reset, but you can't go at it alone anymore. And then that's the role where Congress needs to play with elected officials, but also to the federal regulatory committee or agency or group that Frances has mentioned, where a lot of us have also mentioned too, needs to be in place for regulatory issues. So I think now the next steps needs to be a coming together of Facebook, of Congress, and also too of creation of a regulatory system or board that can all come together to make this much more safer platform for individuals, and in particular for young children too as well.
Mike Isaac, after the hearing, Facebook put forward for interviews their head of global policy management, Monica Bickert. She's a former prosecutor. And I got a chance to ask her about Facebook's own research that Frances Haugen was sharing with us, that Instagram, which is owned by Facebook, harms teenage girls. I want you to listen a little bit. Here's what she said.
The takeaway is that for the majority of teens who are struggling with mental health issues, Instagram either makes things better or has no material impact on them. Now, even if a small number are having a bad experience, that is too much for us. That's why we do the research. And that's a question that people should be asking themselves. Why would a company do these surveys and this kind of research if we didn't care about getting it right?
So, Mike, this hearing was nominally to deal with the impact of social media on young people, on teens and kids. Do you think this moved the ball down the field on the question of do we need to revisit how teens are interacting with social media?
Yeah, no, I think I'm glad you had Bickert on, just because, one of the points that Facebook likes to make is we do an overwhelming amount of good for society. Most of the kids who use Instagram are actually happy with it. But I think the whole point of the data being sort of brought to light is that Facebook does not willingly show this the negative parts of how the company operates unless it's forced into it by, in this case, a whistleblower. And I think that this is the largest document dump that I've ever seen, that I think Facebook has seen in its history. And I do think now that there's internal evidence based on Facebook's own findings, there's more room to push forward. What sort of regulatory outcomes can we get here? And it seems like at least Senator Blumenthal is willing to sort of pursue it, as well as Senator Blackburn are willing to pursue it further.
And Frances Haugen herself had some ideas. And Dr. Williams says, from your perspective as a psychotherapist, I want to get your take on Frances Haugen's claims that Divisive content, she says, was allowed on Facebook, even though the company knew it would have such an adverse effect on its users. So from your work and understanding, how do you view some of the more severe negative consequences that people risk in being exposed constantly, as we all are, as we scroll through our devices, to divisive inflammatory material on a regular basis?
I think it can be harmful mentally because we're looking at something that's not realistic. You know, we tend to put up the best of our days and the best of our photos. And especially for young people, impressionable teenagers, they are always seeking validation. Not that adults don't seek validation too, but they are so much more fragile. They want someone to say, yes, you look good, or that looks nice on you. In addition, when they're looking at others, even those that may be of their age, we don't know how much filtering has been applied to these photos. And as far as mental health is concerned, for children, for adolescents, and even for adults, you know, a false sense of reality can only be harmful to us because we're trying to reach that unrealistic level. We're looking at something that we may not be able to achieve. So it's very impactful on our mental health, and it's giving us an opportunity to just look at ourselves and say, we're not good enough. And so this kind of promotion and what Facebook is accused of doing, it's very serious to our mental health and well-being.
Yeah, those are the last messages that our kids need, especially right now, all the pressure on them already. Mike Isaac, Haugen says that our kids and teens are being actually directed toward the content that is harming them. And it prompted this tweet from Andy Stone, a spokesperson for Facebook, saying that she has no direct knowledge on this issue. And then Facebook's director of policy communications came out not long after that, saying Haugen doesn't have the information that she would need to be able to testify appropriately today. I mean, let's just lay it out here. She came before this Senate hearing with tens of thousands of internal documents. It wasn't just her coming before the panel and giving, you know, these allegations. She had the documents. So there's a couple tweets from representatives with Facebook. We still haven't heard from Mark Zuckerberg on this. Is this going to impact her credibility at all?
I think they're playing a dangerous game in terms of the credibility tweets, the sort of statements. You know, they can fairly point out that, sure, Frances didn't work on every single part of the evidence that she's presenting. And, you know, she was based on a team that's called Civic Integrity, which sort of monitors disinformation and sort of bad content across Facebook. But like you said, you know, like the evidence is there. It's Facebook's own research and kind of speaks for itself. So I think the smart thing that Frances did when she was on the stand today is essentially say, look, this is where I'm not an expert, but I advise you to look into this and frankly ask Facebook to themselves put this stuff forward and bring their own experts to at least try to explain what they say. What they have been saying is misinterpreted research. So just the fact that this is actually out there now and that we can get a chance to look at it is more important to me than whether or not Frances worked on each specific thing that we're talking about.
Sure. And Dr. Williams, you know, Haugen also says that Facebook has to be more honest here and more transparent because so many parents are in the dark when it comes to the addictive nature of what their kids are doing and the dangerous nature of Facebook. But, you know, let's be transparent ourselves. Parents have to have a responsibility here as well. They've got to be more involved with their kids and what they are doing online. I mean, it's our responsibility as parents to play a part in this as well.
Absolutely. You know, raising children is a team effort, and monitoring what they do is also a team effort. You know, it's easy to blame someone else. Yes, these companies and Facebook need to have regulation that they are observed and monitored to see that they are not posting things that are attracting children and directing them in the wrong methods and in the wrong path. But certainly, parents need to play a role. You know, it's easy to give it over and say, well, I think that company should do the right thing, but parents also need to do the right thing. It takes time, it takes a lot of energy, but raising children takes a lot of work. And this is a part of parents' job, is to see what your children are doing, understand what they're being exposed to, and also setting limits. Making sure that their time is not just focusing on social media, but that they have real relationships and that they're not all through social media, and also find out who they're communicating with. So they definitely have a role. And if they play a bigger role, we'll get a very much better positive outcome.
And setting limits maybe on ourselves as well, Doctor. We're all kind of plugged in. And I wonder, what you think the impact of all of this is on all our mental health. Do you see in your practice, and how do you advise people to detox, if you will, from our exposure, our constant exposure, our addiction in many cases to this?
Absolutely. When I'm talking to my clients, you know, and we're talking about where they spend their leisure time, how they communicate with others. And when I'm teaching and talking about social engagement, I always try to emphasize that we need to be attentive to having real conversations, hearing someone's voice and looking at them face to face, especially, of course, socially distancing right now. But that real interaction cannot be replaced by Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, or any social media platform. Yes, we are addictive. I will look at my phone when I have an extra second just to distract myself. But also we have to recognize that, you know, we need to give ourselves a little bit of a break also, because the pandemic isolated us so much and we became dependent upon looking at our social media platforms. So I think the key word here is balance, that we all need balance in using and accessing social media and meeting our needs for interaction with others.
Mike Muse, Senator Klobuchar referenced congressional inaction on privacy laws, denouncing the lobbying of Congress as the reason to why data privacy and consumer protections haven't been prioritized. Could this hearing change that?
Absolutely. I think it opened up that consumer privacy and consumer protections need to be prioritized. It needs to be emphasized. I also think one thing that came out of it was how we need to examine Section 230 and that the fact that there probably needs to be some carve-outs to Section 230. But I think that what was so interesting about Frances' testimony is, as your panelist had alluded to earlier, Facebook acknowledged what she didn't have access to. But what's unique about her background in computer science is that she has the understanding of how these systems work and are at play. And I think that's what made her so credible, and that's what made us all say, let's take a pause and let's figure out how we as a collective can do better on behalf of consumer protection and consumer safety.
And finally, Mike Isaac, all this came today as Facebook was reeling from that blackout, virtual blackout of its services around the world that left really billions of users without access to those social media platforms. Well, what's the latest on that?
Yeah, probably the most ill-timed blackout I've seen in Facebook history. Basically, they were scrambling yesterday to try to figure out what happened. It ultimately was the result. They just did a postmortem today. It was a result of a bad piece of code that was pushed to the site, usually the effect of just one faulty engineering mistake. And it took them about 5 to 6 hours to get access to the server rooms, reset the system, and sort of roll back to where they were before the change. So it was a big mistake, basically not intentional, and they're back up and running. But also a good reminder of how much of the world they power and how many people actually rely on all of their services, not just Facebook, but Instagram and WhatsApp.
It was a striking moment. It really was of silence on those platforms for a change. Mike Isaac, Mike Muse, and Dr. Teresa Taylor-Williams, thanks very much for being with us.
Crews are still scrambling to clean up that devastating oil spill along Southern California beaches. Take a look at that, shut down, and also habitats just hanging in the balance. We are learning new details now about when officials were made aware of that pipeline leak. Matt Gutman is in Huntington Beach with the latest for us.
Here they are about to resume work behind me. And in order to expedite this and throw more funds at the cleanup, Governor Gavin Newsom of California declaring a state of emergency. Obviously, though, everybody is trying to examine that 12-hour time gap between what is apparently the first report of an oil spill Friday evening and Saturday morning around 9 a.m. when Amplify, the oil company, decided to shut down its pipelines, reporting to all the authorities that it seems to have had a leak. Now, that company has been hit with dozens of non-compliance violations over the decades it's been in business. And this morning we are learning that the first federal lawsuit has already been filed against it. Kira.
Matt Gutman, thanks so much.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.